There's some very serious conservation problems that we're going to be faced with, apart from, pollution and global warming and all the rest of it. But most people are just concerned with their own feelings. And so, your feelings about the falcon are sort of typical of how they would think about it. Because they think, well, if I was a wild falcon, I wouldn't like to be flying for an Arab in the desert. But it's actually a relationship which benefits both parties. But, the Arabs may well feel that what we're doing to this country, intensive farming and everything else, is far, far worse. There was a man here one day who got really upset about people in Italy shooting songbirds and eating them. And I said, well, if you really want to help songbirds, just get rid of your car. There are millions of songbirds killed on our roads every year. And but the problem is that, as much as he would like to shoot Italian hunters, he wasn't prepared to give his car up to save birds. And that's the dilemma, is that, modern society, the impact we have on the natural world is incredible, but we're not aware of it. And often, it gets to the point where, there was a lady here the other day, most people tend to be very selfish about it. She said, how can I get rid of the sparrowhawk that comes in my garden? I said, well, they're protected. She said, he's killing all the birds on my bird table. I said, well, that's easy enough, get rid of your bird table. He probably flies from one bird table to the next. He probably thinks it's the best invention man ever made. But she wasn't interested in the sparrowhawk and what sparrowhawks have done for millions of years. All she was interested in was her own feelings, because she couldn't bear the thought of the birds on her bird table being caught by anything else. The fact that we kill more songbirds than all the predators in this country put together doesn't affect it. And there was a man in the United States who spent years releasing peregrines back to the wild, all down the Rocky Mountains, because in America the peregrine became virtually extinct. So they set up a breeding program and released them. And they released over 4,000. One summer he finished releasing peregrines, and he was looking forward to going home to South Dakota with. He stopped off to make a phone call at this sort of motel place that had been built specially for people who had come to buy plots of land. And this was in the Rocky Mountains, beautiful valley. And he was standing there, and he said there was this very attractive blonde lady looking out the window. And he asked her what she was doing there. She said, well, I've come to buy a plot of land for myself and a couple of plots for my brothers. I'm from California. He said, if you look up the valley, he said, can you see those elk? She couldn't see them. And finally he pointed them out, and she was amazed. And she said, do you know what? She said, the elk hunters round here want to stop this development. She said, how could anybody shoot something as beautiful as those elk? And when she turned round, he'd gone. He said, I just couldn't bear it. He said, the moment that development went up, those elk had lost their wintering grounds forever. They were finished. The elk hunters were trying to save them. But she didn't understand the impact that ordinary people have on the natural world. And that's the saddest thing, I think, nowadays, of what's going on with the natural world. That's why we're losing. Well, as I was trying to point out earlier with the tree, the habitat is the most important, more than individual birds.
Plants destroying, yeah.
But anyway, now I've cheered you all up. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Thank you. I'll fly some more birds later. Thank you very much.
Come down.
Quick, innit?
Yeah.
You have to keep track of the thing.
I know.
This is a falcon called Ivy. He's a young falcon. He was hatched last year. He's still learning, but as he gets, I suppose, more confident, more experienced, he'll start to go off further and fly a lot higher. At the moment, he tends to stay very close. But his father's a white gerfalcon. His mother is a quarter ger, 3/4 saker. So he's a hybrid. But Jers and Sakers interbreed in the wild there. Very closely related. And, so he's 5/8 Ger Falcon and 3/8 Saker. But, pick him up, I'll tell you a little bit more about
Gorgeous.
Mm. Thank you. Let your feet breathe a bit.
Ger falcons are the largest of the falcons. They live in the Arctic. Sakers a bit further south in the steppes and plains and deserts of Asia. There's an area in Russia where for many years they've been arguing about whether the falcons there are Ger falcons or Sakers. It's a bit like arguing about whether people who live in Indochina are Chinese or Indian. It's an overlap area. You get birds that are in between. And they can't decide whether they're big Sakers or small Ger falcons. But it doesn't matter. I mean, the birds don't read the bird books, they do what they like. And you get some funny birds in the wild. But his father is a white Ger falcon. If he was a white one, he'd be worth anywhere from £10,000 to £25,000. He's got quite a long lifespan. And 15 to 20 years. But the reason they're so valuable, the white ones, is because to get one you've got to go up into the high Arctic. It'll cost you thousands of pounds to mount an expedition. But nowadays people breed their own. And
Lost it.
ho! I'm trying to get him to fly off further and go higher. Sometimes I like to reward him for doing that by letting him catch it. But I'll give him another go in a moment. They soon learn that when you shout, you're going to let them catch it. But it's important you don't shout every time, because the bright ones won't even chase the lure unless you shout. And the lazy ones just sit in a tree and won't come out till you shout. But he's changing colour at the moment, and when he's finished molting, he'll be even paler than he is now. He should go a lovely white colour with a few spots on the breast, and on the back he'll get lighter with lots of bars, and I'm not quite sure what colour he's going to be. And I'll give him another go, and then I'm going to fly a Saker. That's one I've been flying for 3 years, so he goes off a lot further than this one.
How old is that one?
He was hatched last summer.
Fantastic.
But he's in his immature plumage for the first year. The immature plumage is to help them while they're learning to hunt and conceal them from predators. So they're not as conspicuous in their first year. And not only that, he'll shrink as well. His flight feathers and tail feathers will end up being about an inch shorter. So for the first year, the longer flight feathers, longer tail feathers, make them more buoyant while they're learning to fly. But once they've mastered the problems of flying, then it's more important to be more aerodynamic. And he's been sticky-footed there. He's trying to fly off holding on with one foot and letting go with the other. So once he's finished his molts, he'll look a bit smaller. When you say to people they're going to shrink, often people say, will he get any bigger? But when you say he's going to shrink, people think you're being funny, but that's what happens. So for a big falcon, they're quite agile. But flying around here is a bit like watching a racing car driving around a car park. It doesn't go up far enough to build up any speed. The further off he flies, the faster he can come back. Level flight gerfalcons are fast enough. Most birds in straight chase. Whereas most falcons have to climb above and dive. This time I'll let him catch it again. Ho! Probably by this time next year he'll be going off, he'll be disappearing before he comes back. And, then he'll be able to fly higher and fly faster. When I first started flying him, he used to fly in this little area here, and he never used to get any higher than that off the ground. He suffered from vertigo and agoraphobia. The small prey the male captures is very important because it ensures that they eat all the parts that they have to. Not just the meat, but the bone, the skin, the internal organs. And this works well for a couple of weeks, and then the chicks have grown so much and their appetites have increased so much that the male can't catch enough. And then the female begins to hunt. And she can catch larger prey because she's bigger. And
Wow.
and so they have different
What's
roles.
it,
The female is designed to bring home a larger wage packet than the male. And that's why the females have always been more valued than the males.
Get it?
Yeah.
And that's why I fly mainly males, because they're cheaper. You lure in a twist there. This time I'll let him catch it again.
So fast it is, Whoa.
And he's travelling far too fast. But had that been a bird, he would have killed it. So he would have raked it with his claws.
Clever bird.
You don't
Really
have to
got
worry
you.
about him hitting you. The last thing he wants to do is bump into anybody. I've been flying falcons in displays for years now, and I've never had a falcon hit anybody. We did have one accident where a falcon flew so close to a man's head. He put his hand up so sharply, he punched himself on the nose and knocked himself off the back of the seat. But, the falcon never touched him. Well, that's what we said in court.
You hear it talking. Warning him away from food, isn't he?
See if he's over there.
Right, I'm going to fly an eagle owl next. They fly differently to the falcons. And I'll bring an extra glove out.
Cool.
He's a
Hopefully.
bit disobedient at the moment. When he gets out here, he'll sit on that post looking at the wood for rabbits. When I whistle to call him, he turns around and looks at me as if to say I'm busy at the moment. And for 10 years he's been trying to catch a rabbit. And this year, in the last month, he's caught 3. farmer's pleased, but I'm not. Because it used to be a very obedient owl. The moment you whistled or called or even walked away from him, he was there.
Okay.
But now he's a bit distracted. I have to compete with the rabbits now. But, this is Otto. He's a
Gorgeous, isn't it?
European eagle owl. His grandparents originally came from Germany. But, he was bred in this country at the National Bird Appraisal. And he weighs just under 4 pounds. It's not as heavy as he looks. All feathers. And the females are much bigger. They can weigh anywhere from 6, 7, 8. Some have weighed over 10 pounds. Some eagle owls can weigh more than a male golden eagle. But that's why they're called eagle owls, because of their size. But they hunt differently from the falcons. They do a lot of still hunting. They'll sit quietly on a perch, watching and waiting until they spot their prey. And then they fly very low to the ground, and by gliding along the ground, cut movement down to a minimum. So often the prey never sees them coming until it's too late. The whole time he's out here, and he looks like he's not doing anything at the moment, but he's hunting. And he'll be looking around for rabbits, earthworms, and he'll even catch large beetles and grasshoppers. But I'll see if I can get him to fly over some of your heads. It'll give you an idea how quietly an eagle owl approaches his prey.
Hiding.
That is if I can tear him away from the rabbits.
Oh my god!
Cool. But, I've been trying to get him to knock somebody's head off for years, but he's a very considerate owl. The last thing he wants to do is bump into anyone. And he said, come out and have a go with the owl. And he shook his head and said no, but his dad made him come out anyway. And I wouldn't pick it up like that. Just leave it, he'll hop down. Look at the talons on his feet, they're longer than most dogs' canines. If he grabs your hand for that food, your hand will end up looking like a pincushion. Right, now put your hand down again. You've got no food. Watch. Well, you see, he doesn't do it for fun, he's hunting. That's all he's doing when he's out here, he's hunting for food. So you can't see any reason to sit on your hand. I mean, the fact that you want him to, the slower he becomes. So by the time you get to the end, people coming then. On one occasion, this girl came out to have a go, and he'd had enough by then, he'd eaten far too much. And she stood there with the meat on her hand, and he wouldn't come. And she had a big smile on her face when she came out. That disappeared. Then there were little tears trickling down her face. And her mother had this camera waiting to get a picture of her. And she turned to her mother, she said, I've never been stood up before.